I always loved butterflies since my childhood, and my interest took me to know a few authors from the United States, from England. I wrote a few letters, with the intention that they could possibly give me a copy of their books for my library, my personal library, and for my studies. The only one person who replied and sent me a book was Dr. Marc Minno. And I was very happy for that, and I was very thankful for that. And we corresponded after that for a time. Then back in 2011, finally the dream of knowing him personally came true since the help of Caroline Sharkey and the Florida Tree Institute trips.
Yeah, Carol Ann, she had been coming in the 1990s because she was living in Key West and she was fascinated with the idea of going to Cuba. Cuba was kind of closed at that time, the special period when the Russians had pulled out, and she came here and was fascinated with Cuba. And so she started organizing some trips to bring people to Cuba to enjoy Cuba. She told me about a trip she was organizing, and I said, yes, I want to go. I want to go there. I became fascinated with Cuba because it has so many things that we don't have in Florida. It has mountains, special vegetation. It has many endemic species that are only found in Cuba. It's one of the world's great hotspots for biology, and it's just a beautiful country. And so in meeting Douglas, and Douglas has many of the same interests that I do. Not just knowing butterflies, but also researching, trying to find out how they live, what do they need, what is the habitat like, what are the caterpillars, what are they eating, where are they found? There's so many questions to answer and investigate. We started coming back with Carol Ann's groups, and Douglas would come along, and we'd get to see many places in Cuba that he had never been. And we started finding rare things, unusual things in Cuba. And Cuba's been very well studied as far as butterflies. Luis Roberto Hernandez, he wrote this book and published it himself, but he had an earlier version that was published here in Cuba. But he had traveled around Cuba. He had been contacted by Lee and Jackie Miller, who were the curators for the Allen Museum. And they made a couple of trips with Luis Roberto Hernandez around Cuba. But we have questions now about, since there's so many endemic species, maybe 30% of the butterflies are endemic. Is that right, Douglas? About 30% are endemic to Cuba, found nowhere else in the world. How do we make sure they survive in the long time? Make sure that the habitat is maintained and that they can survive into the future. And so we've made it a priority to search for the rarest butterflies in Cuba and investigate their life histories. What are the caterpillars eating? What food plants do they need? What habitats do they need? This is something that some of these previous works on butterflies have only touched on, or many of the biologies are completely unknown. Who knows what the caterpillars look like or what they eat? A fertile ground there for research. And Douglas has many of the same interests that I do in working out the biologies, investigating the plants and all. And he has connections also with Cuban scientists that can help us with that. So I started organizing my own trips with Douglas and a few other people. We take jeeps, try to find the most unusual places. I look at Google Earth and study the landscape, find very unusual looking places, and then we try to go there. So we're exploring Cuba. We've been to the site with the last sighting of the ivory-billed woodpecker because that would be a very special place. Maybe there's special butterflies there, and just unusual places. And Cuba's full of those kinds of places. But it's also a place where butterflies are not necessarily plentiful a lot of the year, or these rare ones are only in really not just a special place, but even certain places within those places that some little corner of a field that all looks the same. So it takes a lot of looking, a lot of exploring, and with some other scientists, Rainer Nunez is doing a lot of genetic work and finding
New species.
All kinds of new arrangements of the species that we know about. Some of those have been considered just races or subspecies in the past. Now those are being elevated, many of them. So there's a lot going on with butterflies, plants, and other things in biology.
The main goal of our trips were primarily to work on conservation purposes of Cuban butterflies. It's true that Tree Institute, along with Marc and the others, that helps to finance these trips, has largely contributed to the knowledge of Cuban butterflies. We have found many new host plants for caterpillars of Cuban species. I want to say that in one of those trips, Marc found a new Callisto species for science. It was in Mayari area, close to Villa Mayari.
Yes.
Villa Mayari. Mm-hmm. It turned out to be a new species for science that was recently described and it was named after Caroline Sharkey. So this is Callisto Sharkey for the contribution that she has made to conservation of Cuban butterflies and making possible the trip to Cuba and do all the research and observation that we have been doing.
Because of the support from the Tree Institute, we named it for Caroline Sharkey. So for instance, Steve, I might show here some caterpillars. This is our trip here in June 2023. Now here's a caterpillar that we found at Saroa. This is a very common swallowtail species. This is the Bahamian swallowtail, feeds on citrus, but also other kinds of native plants in that family, the Rutaceae. And so this is a partly grown caterpillar. But Douglas also found this very special group of caterpillars here when we were in Vinales Valley. This is the Antillean crescent. Not been documented, the caterpillar or the host plant, and just by chance, Douglas observed the female laying eggs, and so we're raising those. We'll be photographing this, documenting it, publishing it as a scientific observation, and making it available for other scientists. So this is one of the highlights of this trip. All of these trips we see common species of butterflies, and we're happy to see those, but then we also find some rare, unusual, or things we haven't ever seen before to document what's going on.
Yeah.
And this is one of the special things then is the Antillean crescent caterpillars.
Yeah, there's been a lot of new findings of host plants that we are amazed. We have a lot to add in our list of host plants now for Cuba.
And even though we have Luis Hernandez's book, this is fairly old. This is published in the 1990s. Just recently, there's been a new book. This is published just last year, 2022. And this is tremendous at updating us. There are new species of butterflies that have been discovered since this time and are illustrated in here. But we continue to work with a network of scientists that are doing genetic work and other kinds of work, and we're still discovering new species of butterflies and trying to figure out.
Right.
We're not sure. There's 200 or so.
201 now.
But there's probably more than that, and maybe new ones that haven't been found yet. And so those rare ones are of our greatest concern because of the way the world's going. We're losing species at a tremendous rate. So we want to make sure that people know, well, in Cuba, here are rare species. These are the ones that are in most need of conservation. Where are they found? What kinds of habitats? What can we do to protect them for the long term?
Preparing a book, another field guide for Cuban butterflies. What I think is new for this book is that the reader can find the pictures of the live specimen in the case that we have all those pictures, but we also show the caterpillar can also be found in the field, and you can identify through caterpillars the species of butterflies. We also give a range map. We provide information of the a brief description of the caterpillar, it's going to be new in that sense with caterpillar pictures.
This is the innovation with our book, is the biological side of it, because neither of these books have much biology in them. The biology is so important because they're all closely associated with plants. To conserve the butterflies, you need the plants and that habitat to help save it.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that also the reader will be able to have an idea of month of occurrence of that species of butterfly, because sometimes you ask somebody, when can I find that butterfly species, and there you will be able to see that information too, as well as where and when. It's also, I think it's important to know the caterpillar, because sometimes we don't see the adult in the field. But if we look at the known host plants and we found eggs or caterpillars, we can identify them and we can say, yes, the butterfly is here. Well, even though the adult is not present, but the caterpillar is.
Yes.
And I think it will be very good. We have explored now most of the Cuban provinces except the Isle of Youth and a few other provinces. Anyway, we expected to see rare butterflies, especially in the east of Cuba. We did well. We found species that are not found nowhere else, as the Cuban endemic Olguinia olguin that was found in MOA. In all other cases, we didn't expect to see this butterfly or the other, and we just find it. So, but I think most of all, it's been a challenge, because we, at the beginning, we didn't know what to expect. We had some new records from literature. We would go some places to look for certain species, but instead we would find something else. It's just that you have to look further. You have to explore more. If you do that, I think you can find more and more that you expected to see. Now we are able to say that we have found specific locations, and that is good to mention, for species, very rare Cuban species that they were thought to be very rare. Now we have found places and where...
These trips were exploring Cuba. For this particular trip in June of 2023, that was a good question. When do we come to Cuba to look for butterflies? We've been here in the wintertime, which is a great time for birds. Migrating birds are here, as well as the endemic birds. But that's a poor time for butterflies. And I think we've decided over many trips that summer, June, July, August, September are probably the best months for butterflies. June, July seems to be a time period when we can come here, be fairly certain we're not going to get hurt by a hurricane. And in this particular trip, we're doing Western Cuba. We started in Havana. We drove to Las Terrazas, which is one of the biosphere reserves, of 6 biosphere reserves. These are in areas that are really unusual, often in mountains or places where you can't farm or do anything with. And many of the species in those places are just really unusual, a lot of endemics. This trip we were exploring the Western Mountains. This mountain range goes for miles, from Las Terrazas all the way west, way past Vinales. So we visited Las Terrazas, we visited Saroa, the orchid garden and the forest there. That is a hot spot for endemic butterflies. We've seen many unusual butterflies at Saroa that we've never seen anywhere else. This time we visited for the first time La Guira National Park or Biosphere Reserve. We're very impressed with that. It's a spectacular landscape there. It's got to have many unusual butterflies. We've hardly had any rain this trip, and it's been very dry here, so the butterflies really haven't kicked in like they should. We've seen a few places with literally hundreds, thousands of butterflies, but very local, and the rare ones have been very sparse, and we haven't seen many of the ones that we were expecting to see on this trip. We did go all the way to the westernmost point, the lighthouse in Guanacabibi's Peninsula National Park. Incredible landscape. I'm so glad we got to see that. I've been wanting to go there for many years. It's just the most odd, spectacular, marine-wise, beautiful cliffs along the sea and dry tropical forests and just amazing. Hundreds of butterflies in some places. We did find some new material this time, new things we've never seen before. We did visit some areas that I picked out on Google Earth, including these serpentine areas. I think we did well on this trip.
Yeah.